Welcome to Crocheting Through Medical History. Tis me, Maria, here to crochet and talk about medical history. Take a note on the audio. I can still only get my recordings to play audio out of one side at a time. So I have chosen the right side because I listen to things in my right side if I have to choose one or the other. If you're not, sorry about that. I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what's happening. If you are like an AV genius and want to give me any suggestions, go for it. I won't stop you. Let's move on. Other note before we start. So I'm making today this brown tank top. That's what I'm looking for. I'm making a brown tank top. Editing Maria, if you don't want to hear about my tank top, skip ahead like 2 minutes. If you notice, it's the same colors that I was making that cardigan in like a month ago. That's funny because it is. So I was making the cardigan and it wasn't working. So I tore it all apart. So now I just have a pile of yarn. And I was like, I want to make a tank top instead. But, funny story, I was making the cardigan with 3 strands of yarn. But for this, I only want 2 strands of yarn. But here's the kicker. My yarn, all 3 strands, are just in a pile right now in a tote. So what's really fun about crocheting 2 strands of yarn from a pile of 3 strands of yarn is that there's an extra one. If you can do math and are following along with me, I have 2 strands of yarn here that I'm crocheting with, and then I have a 3rd strand of yarn that I'm not crocheting with. So I have the joy of, as I'm working with these 2, I also am rolling a ball of the yarn I'm not using. So I'm sick of it, but I'm excited for this tank top. Although I already made it too wide. And it also is really thick since there's 2 strands of yarn. We're just gonna see what happens. And it's gonna be really fun. So, that's crocheting with Maria story time. If I start to cry while I'm winding up yarn, you'll know why. And I think that's beautiful. So, let's get into it. So this week, we are talking about multiple sclerosis, or MS. And we have a special real-life sick person at the end of this. So stick with me if you want to learn a little bit about what it's like to live with MS from someone that has it. So, according to the Mayo Clinic, multiple sclerosis, MS, is a potentially disabling disease of the brain and spinal cord, central nervous system. In MS, the immune system attacks the protective sheath, myelin, that covers nerve fibers and causes communication problems between your brain and the rest of your body. What's happening? Wow, wait, am I even doing this right? Wait, what stitch am I doing? The first suspected case of MS was in 1395, seen in a 16-year-old girl called Ludwina the Virgin from Schiedam, Holland. Ludwina became ill and fell while ice skating, later developing partial blindness, weakness, and pain. She died 38 years later and is seen by some as the mascot of ice skating and sickness. While some are hard-pressed on the similarities between Ludwina's case and MS, other researchers are convinced her symptoms were caused by another condition. In 1838, brain damage, now known to be caused by MS, was discovered by Robert Caswell, who found scars and lesions on the brains and spinal cords of some of his autopsy patients. Caswell conveyed this information on diagrams, which he published. In 1841, Jean Cuvier was researching scarring of the brain and spinal cord and was able to link the damage to symptoms like tremors and trouble walking in patients. In 1868, symptoms of MS, or la sclérose en plaques, were extensively described by Jean-Martin Charcot, neurologist at the Hospital des Salpêtrières. I'm not trying to be like racist. I'm just really bad at pronouncing words that aren't in my language. Charcot was able to link the brain damage discovered 30 years prior to MS and was able to attribute this to impaired conduction of the central nervous system. Charcot helped distinguish between tremors of paralysis agitans of Parkinson's and Charcot's triad of MS symptoms: intention tremor, nystagmus, and scanning speech. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Augustus d'Este, grandson of George III, kept a record in his diary about his symptoms now attributed to MS: blurred vision, double vision, leg weakness, numbness, incontinence, impotence, tremors, and spasms. In the early 1900s, Wilhelm Nero Pilot Barbellion, pen name Bruce Frederick Cummings, described his neurologic symptoms in Journal of a Disappointed Man, which are now known to be MS. Numbness and weakness in limbs, vertigo, depression, decreased sight, and facial numbness. At the time, Barbellion's neurologist attributed his symptoms to an STD and treated him by using a drumstick to tap his tendons and work his reflexes. The neurologist, though, did not tell this diagnosis to Barbellion, who recruited a military physician to give him the diagnosis of disseminated sclerosis to disqualify him from service. Barbellion's treatment included arsenic, strychnine, and a variety of homeopathic remedies. And now, folks, we are at the point where this yarn we're not using is getting in the way of the ones we are using. It's time to roll it up. Can you tell I'm having fun? I'm having such a bad time. What's even happening? Why is there a knot here? Where did this come from? Hello? Oh, we did it. Okay. In 1916, Dr. James Dawson at Edinburgh University utilized improved microscopes to examine the brain tissue of people with MS after they were dead, just in case there was any confusion. This research showed inflammation of the brain as well as damage to myelin, which is a fatty sheath that covers and protects nerves. Through the 19th and 20th centuries, experimental treatment for MS included nightshade, arsenic, mercury, and injection with malaria. Through the 1900s, research of MS continued and helped doctors and patients better understand the condition. In the 20s, the lumbar puncture, extracting fluid from around the spinal cord, allowed researchers to investigate higher protein levels found in MS patients. Elvin Kabat at Columbia University determined that this excess protein was a result of the damage caused to the myelin. Today, these proteins are used to indicate inflammation levels in the body and better understand the damage done to the nerves. While lumbar puncture is an unpleasant experience, knowing these criteria are extremely helpful in determining the effectiveness of MS treatments used. Once penicillin was discovered in the mid-1900s, natural plug for last week's episode, Discovery and Development of Penicillin, physicians experimented with its treatment of MS, but it showed no real effect. In the 1950s, MS attacks were first treated with a steroid, cortisone, which decreased the effects of MS acutely, but had no effect on the condition chronically. The cause of MS was not known at this time, but researchers hypothesized infections, toxins, and blood flow disorders as possible factors. In the 1960s, Thomas Rivers and the Rockefeller Institute established MS as an autoimmune disease in which the body's myelin is destroyed by its own cells. Around this time, names considered for MS were disseminated sclerosis, insular sclerosis, and polysclerosis. but in the end, multiple sclerosis became the official English term for the condition. With this discovery of immune involvement in MS, treatment hypotheses became more pertinent, and the use of corticosteroids to treat acute symptoms remained popular. By the 1970s, CAT scans and MRIs were used to visualize the effects of MS. CAT scans were able to use X-rays to view cross-sections in the brains of living people, providing a view that was previously only available during an autopsy. At this time, though, the procedure was still new and not well developed, so CAT scans regularly missed scarring on the brain. MRIs were able to create views of the same cross-sections as CAT scans, but the images were clearer and easier to decipher. In the 1980s, MRIs became even more helpful with the use of gadolinium, an injectable marker that allowed physicians to visually distinguish between old scarring and active lesions on the brain. At the very end of the 70s, researchers began using immunomodulatory strategies in attempts to slow the progression of MS and reduce the frequency of relapses. Medications used were interferon and glatiramer acetate, which are still used in the treatment of MS today. Thank you to T. Jock Murray, the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine, the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America, and the Multiple Sclerosis Trust for information used in today's episode. And now it is time for
Interview with a real-life sick person.
Today's real-life sick person is my uncle who has MS. I don't know if he's going to listen to this, but if you do, thanks for answering my questions. I really appreciate it.
What was your initial reaction when you were diagnosed?
I initially went to the doctor because I had a muscle twitch in my cheek that went on for a few weeks. He tried some medication, but it didn't work, so he referred me to a neurologist. When I met with the neurologist, he said the most likely explanation was stress. This made sense to me because at the time I had a very stressful job. He did an MRI, which showed lesions on my brain. I was quite shocked when he told me that the lesions were indicative of MS. My wife was pregnant at the time, so the first thought that went through my mind was an image of me in a wheelchair holding my baby.
What are your top survival strategies for your condition?
I have been in remission since 2012, so I no longer have any survival strategies. I take a pill every day, then I do not have to think about MS at all. Back when I was having symptoms, a survival strategy was simply knowing my limitations and sometimes needing to decline things that I ordinarily would have done. I knew any plans I made were subject to how I was feeling.
What is the best thing to come from your condition?
MS can be exacerbated by stress, so it is important to manage it well. After being diagnosed, I was much more thoughtful about my life choices. I ended up quitting my job in order to manage the stress, which was a wonderful thing. I often joked with people that my quality of life improved after being diagnosed.
What do you wish the general public knew about your condition?
MS is not the condition that it used to be. My neurologist once told me that even up to the 1990s, after diagnosing some with MS, you simply wished them luck and sent them on their way because there were no treatment options. Now, with at least 15 therapies available, MS is often something that simply needs to be managed, but doesn't need to impact quality of life. So thank you, Uncle Brandon, for being today's real-life sick person. If you are a real-life sick person, dear listener, or there is a condition out there that you are interested in learning about and the history of, let me know. You can comment if you're on YouTube. You can DM me or comment on a post if you're on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. Please also like and share with your friends. Give me a follow on Instagram, Maria Makes Makes. I don't really know what I'm going to do with this yarn, with this dang tank top that is just chaos. Hopefully I can figure it out because it's getting warm and I could use some more tank tops. If you follow me on Instagram, I posted on my story that I finally get to crochet some donations to donate to the local hospitals. Hopefully I can make some cute little baby hats and booties and maybe some blankets, and I can donate those and make some little babies warm and happy. So that's very exciting and something that I will definitely be posting about. Shout out to my mom because she tagged me in a post on Facebook with crochet stackable dinosaur baby toys. And there were a few people that were like, bro, I would pay you to make those for me. So I'm going to be making some stackable dinosaur baby toys, and I'm very excited about it. So excited. I love dinosaurs, and I love babies, and I try to bond with babies through dinosaurs. And so far it's worked pretty well, so I am excited to further bond with these children by making them dinosaur toys. I'll also be posting that. I did finish Allie's bucket hat, and it is now off with her. I did record some of that, and I'm going to be posting it on YouTube at some point when I get around to like editing all the footage and going through it all, but that's something to look out for. I also noticed that I have not been posting on Mondays the audio only episodes like I said I was going to. My bad. I will probably get back into that. They'll get done at some point. Sorry if you're waiting on that. If you're waiting on it, comment below. It's incentive for me to do them faster. I think that's all for today. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope you learned something, and stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you next week. Bye.